at RTX 2022. So thank you for doing an interview.
Oh, yeah.
How's your RTX going so far?
It's going great. It's a little bit surreal to be back and doing it. And of course, it's still a little bit affected by COVID and the state of things, but it's fun. And it's just seeing everyone, seeing people you haven't seen in literal years now is great.
That's awesome. So what do you think so far is the weirdest part about being back besides, seeing everybody?
I think that because we're wearing masks,
oh yeah,
we're not being recognized. I'm not recognizing people. It's just this dissonance of like, is that person? I think it's this person. So it's like we're all kind of like superheroes in a weird way, where I'm like, I think I know your identity, but I'm not sure.
Right. You're like, all right, this is I can go hide in the crowd and not worry about it.
Not that people are, I think it's both ways, where I'm like, I think that's that person I met 3 years ago, but I'm not sure because I can't see their entire face, sort of deal.
So with like 30 Morbid Minutes, what inspired you and Jessica to start this podcast?
There are two things that I think that I've been a fan of for most of my life, which are the Muppets and horror. And I had this concept for a podcast called 60 Morbid Minutes, which is a play on 60 Minutes.
Yeah.
And I just kind of had it tucked into my back pocket as, oh man, if someday on my list of ideas of like, this would be a fun thing I would enjoy doing. And then Jess, who I love, and we've talked for years about what if we had some avenue to do something together, came to me and said, hey, do you want to do a podcast together? And because it's something in two different places we can feasibly do now.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's awesome. And she said, well, do you have any ideas and stuff? And I said, I have this one that I've been sitting on. And she is such a naturally curious person.
Yeah. And
curious in the way that she asks the best questions. She has just such a lust for like knowledge. Mm-hmm. And even though I think, at first I thought, I don't really know Jessica to be a particularly morbidly fascinated person.
Yeah.
Because I do know that she doesn't really watch a lot of horror movies.
Right.
She scares a little bit more easily. But then I learned, oh no, Vasami, she's got a hidden side to her. And that's been super fun. And she's telling me all these stories of playing with the Ouija, and I'm like, you are a freak, Jessica Vasami. I did not know this about you. So it's just so fun. I feel like it's one of those chemistry lightning in a bottle situations where at first I thought maybe she'll learn to love this more, and then I'm like, oh no, she's so into this.
Yeah. Would you guys ever do like haunt her and go places and explore things like spooky places?
Potentially. We've talked about maybe at some point, for example, we just did an episode about death at Disneyland, and she's never been to Disneyland.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, Jess, you need to go see where all these people died.
Yes.
I need to take you ride by ride and show you where all these fatalities occurred. And so she's of course like, okay, all right. So if we had more time during this trip, I feel like we would go to maybe some interesting Austin locations. And so it's definitely in the cards.
That would be really
cool. I
think.
Yeah.
Doing because I know the Haunted Mansion has some sort of spooky background to it. So
isn't it notoriously where everyone dumps their ashes?
Yeah, which then they get back and
yeah. Which I'm sure as an annual pass fan,
Yeah. All those weird Disney things.
100%. When I go to Disneyland, I have this my toxic trait is I'm waiting in the long lines and I'm reading about who died there.
Yeah.
And if this episode performs well, I would love to do a haunted Disney episode and cover stuff like that and, the rides that are purportedly haunted.
That would be really cool.
So, yeah.
So what do you think is the weirdest, most fascinating thing that you've learned so far?
Oh, that's a great question. Maybe exploding coffin syndrome, which was something our PR rep is shaking her head. Sorry. I apologize because I'm about to explain this, but I didn't know that this was a thing that exists where in above ground crypts that you would keep in a mausoleum, because there's so much pressure inside of these due to just the natural decomposition gases that a corpse emits, and I apologize to anyone for this being graphic, but the natural gases being emitted, it creates a pressure cooker inside, and any actual mortician or person who is, a professional in the funerary business knows that you need to be able to let off this pressure like a gasket.
Right.
But the funeral industry has sold this notion to us that you need to have like this sealed coffin. Sorry.
No.
That like a sealed tight coffin is the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
But so you're creating this pressure cooker where you might create also some like fluids or sludge and then all the pressure builds up and has nowhere to release, so maybe the lid pops. It's a whole thing.
Oh.
But I mean, in all my years of being into this sort of stuff, I had never come across that.
Yeah, that's weird.
And a lot of mausoleums, it's so gross, I'm sorry again, but they have like little, tubes or outlets at the back for this sludge to,
Oh.
but yeah, it's a whole thing.
That's, I think, the weirdest part when I was listening to that episode. That was the weirdest part for me, that they had the little, like, sludge off.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's so
yeah,
messed
they
up.
planned for the sludge.
Right, at least they do, instead of just letting it kind of, like, sit
Yeah.
and coagulate. And
Yeah.
I can't even imagine the smell. Like, yeah,
Oh,
sorry,
yeah.
morbid people, but,
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. What do you think is the most interesting thing that you've learned about yourself and about Jess through this process?
Well, Jess, as I mentioned, she's a little freaky. I mean, I knew that, but I didn't know that, if you know what I mean. And about myself, it's just, I think a lot of it too is an exercise in just being a more empathetic person, because we are dealing with subject matter that, whether it's 100 years ago or 20 years ago, affects real people.
Yeah.
And so something, for example, like the bodies that still exist across Mount Everest
Right.
that are treated, kind of the internet treats them as these sort of memes in a way.
Right.
These like landmarks. And I'm like, that person incurred that risk, but it's still somebody's brother or mother or
Right.
daughter. Like it's one of those things where it's easier out of sight, out of mind if it's something, a person that died 200 years ago.
Right.
It's a lot easier, but it gets harder. So I do think it is an exercise in empathy in that way. Trying to be a better in a weird way, as we exploit these morbid topics, trying to be a better person about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I think that's all I have for right now. So
Thank you for
Elyse.
listening and taking an
Yeah.
interest, and I appreciate it
Yeah,
so much.
it's been super exciting, and that's like the best part about my week is the 30 more minutes of the week.
Don't tell Jack.
Yeah, right.
Do not tell Jack. You'll not be happy. You'll be seeing me featured in an episode of 30 Morbid Minutes.
Right.
him.
Elyse somehow randomly kicked the bucket. Thank you.
Thank you.